Also, if I suddenly go out,
There we go.
it's because of the rain. It just started raining again.
Oh,
So just
no.
letting you guys know if I just suddenly disappear.
Okay.
No.
No worries.
That
There we
Texan
go.
weather is crazy.
Yeah, you're lucky you're in Arizona.
Actually, back in LA.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but now I'm packing so I can go
Oh my
back.
gosh. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining Asian Queens in Animation. Today we have our Breaking into Development in Animation panel. We have these amazing panelists here, and I'm gonna let Lexie from our team she's gonna be moderating, so I will pass it on to you.
Thank you, Monsi. Well, welcome everyone to our Breaking into Development panel. As Monsi said, I'm Lexie, I'm part of the AQI team, and I'm currently at Netflix and Features Development. Now I'm excited to welcome and present our three panelists. So let's do some intros. So name, pronouns, how you culturally identify, what's your animation story and your development story. So let's go in alphabetical order. Andi, how about you start?
Oh my gosh, hi. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Andi Hester, she, her. I have your questions here as well, so I can pretend I remembered them, but I didn't. Let's see. How I culturally identify, I'm half Chinese. My mom is from Taiwan, and I work at DreamWorks. I'm currently a script coordinator, but my previous job was development assistant, supporting two vice presidents in development at DreamWorks. And were there any other questions you need to hit on?
I think you got it all, but I think you have an interesting career before you started animation.
Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you for that. So before I worked in animation, I was an actor for about 5 years. And as I mentioned in my bio, right after graduating from college, I moved to Beijing because I love China. I realized in college I loved being Chinese and I just wanted to be there. I wanted to use my Mandarin skills. So I found a job working at a creative agency there. And I was like, great, I have my real job, 9 to 5. And then I realized I think I want to be an actor. And as it happens in China, I randomly found a job hosting a Chinese travel series. I booked a few things out there, decided to move back to Los Angeles, where I'm from, to like properly pursue acting. So then for about 5 years, I just went to a lot of auditions, booked very few jobs, but drove all around town and got involved at UCB and Groundlings. And so it was actually through studying improv, I realized, oh, maybe acting isn't what I'm drawn to when I watch my favorite TV shows. Maybe it's actually the writing, and maybe hopefully I'm better at it than acting. So once I realized that, I just decided to try to get my foot in the door anywhere I could. And I was so lucky to, find an assistant job in development at DreamWorks. And maybe I'm running long on this right now, but I just think development is such an amazing place to, spend your whole career, but also to start off. And because you really get an amazing kind of like bird's eye view on how a studio works as a whole. And as an assistant, you get to work with so many people across, your studio and at other companies as well.
Awesome. So Grace, I believe you didn't begin in animation?
I did not. I actually started from production, one of those people who worked the other way around. So just going from the beginning of your questions, this is Grace here, pronoun she, her. I identify as a first generation Chinese American. I grew up in Beijing and moved to California when I was 16. And went to NYU for college, trying to be a writer director, still trying to be. After college, my first job was following a Chinese director as her assistant, a creative assistant. Also served as her showrunner assistant briefly while she was developing her TV shows. And that's what drew me to development, actually. And when I came back to the States, I somehow just found Pearl Studio who are looking for a creative assistant. And I'm like, hey, I've always loved animation. I took one intro to animation class in college, suck at drawing, but loved the class and loved my classmates, still in touch with them, hitting them up for projects. And I just found the niche of developing an idea, how to bring that, to fruition and to green light. that's the process I'm really enjoying here, working with Pearl. So yeah, that's my journey.
What kind of things do we know that you worked on?
Lately, I joined Pearl at the tail end of Abominable, so kind of near the final cut of the film, and also Over the Moon. A lot of localization work, also, giving notes to the outline revision and animatics revision, giving them feedbacks and notes, things like that. So these are, both available online for you to view. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Over the Moon, Pearl Studio, Netflix, Mira.
Hi, I'm Mira. She, her. Yeah. What are the questions? Sorry. I work at Netflix Animation. I work in the original animated films department. I support the head of that department. And I grew up in a small town in Arizona called Carefree. Uh, Super like it's like a retirement town. We don't have stoplights. We don't have stop signs. And kind of grew up in that world. And always romanticized the idea of LA and Hollywood and pursuing the ultimate dream of working in movies. And I've always loved animated movies and like always knew that I wanted to work in animated movies. So I went to college. I went to UCLA for film school, and it was great and all. But I learned the real stuff once I started working. And yeah, I think what drew me to animation was when I first took an animation class, and I think it was more so the people. I think like just hanging around a bunch of like darky like artists all the time. I think that was just when I realized like, oh, this is like the kind of environment that I want to be around and I love. So that's what drew me to animation. But then I was like, well, I like art, but I'm not an artist. So, what I do love is the storytelling, the writing. And so I think animation development was the best of both worlds, where I could kind of understand and be a part of everything. And so, yeah, basically I started my career at Warner Brothers. I was kind of supporting the executive team there. And then after a couple years, I moved over to Netflix, and it's been a few months at Netflix Animation. So still very, very new, but I've been enjoying and learning a lot. So very exciting.
Were you at a different studio before Warner Brothers?
Yeah, I interned at Sony Animation before that, in their development department. And that was where I got like the 101, here's what development is. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I get to read and, read scripts all the time. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is something cool. And I think I could really pursue this.
Yeah. Speaking of this, what is development? What does it actually mean? And anyone can take this.
I'll take this. Development to me, it basically is starting from the very beginning. You might get your idea from a book or from a feature, or just it might be a completely original idea. And in development, you develop the idea. You kind of you might attach writers or attach artists and kind of build out the look and feel of the show with the ultimate goal of selling that show to a Netflix or a Hulu or what have you. But it's really where ideas, I think, kind of blossom, and then after a show is sold, then it moves into current series, and they kind of take it from there and keep that wonderful idea going.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I feel like our listeners probably are film school students or animators currently, and we are often taught to know the pipeline of the production or, post things afterwards. And when I was working in my first two jobs, I realized, oh, I knew nothing about before a project is greenlit. So the way I see it is kind of the work done between a conceived idea to, this project is now on the slate and gonna be ready to go, be greenlit. Like Andy said, there's a lot of, talent search, attaching creatives and working with the creatives to shape the pitch and the outline to its best shape before going out, and also researching who are the best collaborators, distributors, things like those. So yeah, very enriching experience.
Yeah, and I definitely, just to bounce up, just building off of that, the creative readiness aspect of it is, I think, development is, making it, building the foundation of the story, and, basically everything that production will, from there then on will lean on once the project is greenlit. I think that's that's what development is, and I think it's super fun to be able to be involved in that kind of brainstorming aspect of a project.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of other departments do you work with on a daily basis?
I'll start if no one else is going to start. Some other, I see a lot of nodding, thinking. I mean, at least when I was in development at DreamWorks, a lot of the main department we worked in was like development production. And so we worked very closely with them to find artists and kind of get art to put in the pitch deck that we would eventually use to sell a show. It's so much fun though, because like I was saying earlier, you get to work with so many different departments. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, you get to work with legal as you're getting deals together and trying to attach creatives. You also get to work with, let's see, you also get to work with, why am I blanking? So many. I mean, down the line, there's marketing and PR. That's obviously, as you know, a show is in current series, but you kind of liaise with them and kind of keep them up to speed on what's going on. Oh, you also get to work with CP, so consumer products. If you have like a real hot show and they're like, that's going to make $1 billion, they kind of come in early days and, kind of figure out how you can collaborate. Someone else jump in.
I think also agencies, I know it's not a department, but it's a whole nother entity, but always just getting emails and submission materials and scripts and samples and whatnot from agencies and management, other representation. And, it's cool to be able to expose yourself to up and coming talent, or even really fancy people that are making the big bucks in this industry, and seeing kind of, what an early idea looks like even for them. And sometimes it's not even that good. And you're like, oh, maybe, maybe I can do that too. Like eventually, so it's kind of cool to be able to see the content that's out there. But yeah, that's another example of, another group of folks that we interact with all the time in development.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's the same for both Andi and Mira. At Pearl, within the creative development, we have a team of viz dev artists, visual development artists too, who work on, in with us on the story development and even like the artwork that goes into the pitch. We always influence each other, and we often see, in our headquarters in Shanghai, there's a gigantic meeting room, and they always sit together in circle, and we will always borrow idea from, the artists who are more visually driven, and then us creative people will help them streamline the narrative, things like that. So it's a really nice way of mutually, work on the same project and benefit our strengths and weaknesses together.
That's beautiful. Gotta love those cross-functional partners. But I do have a question. I think, Grace, you might have a good answer for this. How is animation development different from live action development?
I have limited experience for live action development, but what I want to say is probably how in the pipeline of animation development, we have the drawings, the storyboard and viz dev materials going on at the same time, as well as the, screenplay and written narrative. They're going kind of simultaneously. And like I mentioned earlier, they influence each other, especially when you're in early stage of the production. Sometimes the animatics are going way farther than even, where the screenplay is locked. And but sometimes, the screenplays are locked way beforehand, and then you get back into the production. So that's slightly different from live action, which is like, okay, now this is our shooting script. We go in to break it down into storyboard and then go on set to shoot. Meanwhile, for animation, it's kind of like we board things out while we're planning the story, and they come together in the end as we're producing this. Not sure if I'm clear. Please help me out, Mira and Andi.
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much nailed it. And I think also another thing to point out is I think animation's pipeline is so much longer, and especially on the film side, I can't speak for TV, but the development aspect of it, can be years. So, I have never worked in live action, but my impression is that it's a lot faster of a process. So.
Andi, do you have something?
Yes, and I thought it in my brain and then I laughed on camera. So I hope you all enjoyed that. I'll share it. I was just thinking how I'm working on a show right now at DreamWorks and it hasn't been announced yet. But when I tell my family oh, I'm so excited, I'm working on this, and they're like, tell us when we can watch it on TV. And I'm like, I think it'll be a few years from now. So that's what happened. And then now you all know.
Very posthumous.
Yes. Oh no, does that mean it's after you're dead?
Well,
oh my gosh. I hope I'm still alive to see.
You already, what if you go back to acting one day and then
career posthumous.
I work on animation. Yeah.
For a moment, it was turning into a different conversation.
It got real spooky. Grace had predicted my imminent death. I was like, oh gosh.
All right. So how are you involved in the development of all of the shows you're working on?
I could start if you would like. Just because, Pearl is relatively a younger team, and I've only been with them for 2 years almost. So for Abominable, I only joined them at the tail end of the production, so largely worked on localization. You know how there's, we distribute it in China too. So there are subtitle translation, lyric translation, and checking on if things are culturally accurate, a lot of those things. And working with the PR team, marketing team to think of social media contents, things like that. And as of Over the Moon, I was more involved in general because I joined them at an earlier stage of the production. We had a chance to give notes to, the screenplay and also one of the first few cuts of the film. So it's me and the whole creative team. And what I love the most about our team is they value everybody's input, including the interns. We had 2 or 3 interns in our office at the time. And it's not very hierarchical in our team. So whoever has a brighter point to contribute, we would also send it in. And also working with our Shanghai headquarter colleagues to see how they have to adapt certain scenes or lyrics to adjust to different, market per se. And that's a really cool and eye-opening experience for me. And as of now, I'm more involved with, projects that are currently on the slate, trying to attach writer directors going to be greenlit. I'm kind of compiling the list of talents, as well as giving notes to actual outlines, beat sheets of the screenplay, and also organizing, new visual development artist team for our ongoing projects, things like that. So yeah.
Just jumping really quickly off what you mentioned, Grace, about how, you were getting input from interns too. I had a similar experience where, I started in this position thinking okay, I'm an assistant, don't look at me. I'm just, I'm just stapling, I'm just answering emails. And then to my pleasant surprise, in our team, they're like, what do you think about this design? Or what do you think about that? Or sometimes if something related to Chinese culture, they'd say, what word would you put there? Or kind of, it was just so surprising and amazing. And I'm seeing some nods, maybe it's true of a lot of development departments where, because the idea is so new and so fresh, you know, it's only going to help the project if you get as many eyeballs on it early on and from different ages, different perspectives. And so I'd say for anyone considering development, one of my favorite things about it is that you really do get to have input and people really do care what you think, because, you might be the demo, or you might have a little brother or sister who's a demo. Regardless, you have an opinion and it matters.
Mira, where are you running off to every single day?
Where am I running off to?
Where?
My Gmail inbox is where, but I think I guess in a day-to-day, in terms of like involvement with the productions and stuff, it is kind of, for example, we'll get a script or a new draft of, from the production, and the executives have to read through it and compile their opinions and their thoughts and their takes, and, just consolidating all of that information and then setting up a meeting for the filmmakers and the executives to kind of hash it out and see like where creatively, if they can align, and, so those conversations, and making sure, like, at least for my part, making sure that they have everything, they feel prepared to have that conversation. And then also tracking, a lot of it is like, because, for example, Netflix has so many productions and so many shows in development that, it's trackers on trackers. And so making sure that we have a system of a foundation that we can always rely on as a source of truth is really important. But then going off of what Andi was saying in terms of opinions, like, your opinions really do matter. And so many, like, all of my executives, on the team, they always ask everybody, regardless of, what your role is, they'll ask you, like, what do you think? We want to know your thoughts. Like, if anything, they're like pushing you so that you can do better in your role, as well as prepare you for the future too, which I think is really awesome. I think the more you're pushing yourself to read the material and formulate your own thoughts and opinions, the better you become in terms of articulating your taste. I think, which is really, really important in development when you're, like what Grace is saying, making writers lists, or, trying to attach directors and artists to a production, understanding like what is good for a specific narrative, or, the emotional tone, like being able to pinpoint all those things really takes practice. And so, being exposed to that, I think, is what I enjoy and is the learning experience that I'm getting. So.
Yeah, all thanks to the assistants and all their scheduling and helping out with the process. So anyway, what was the application process like for your first development job?
I'll jump in first. The application process was scary for me because I had been an assistant many times before, but this was my first time, trying to be an assistant in the industry, which is like, so when, I found out, I submitted my resume, and then a recruiter calls you to make sure like you're like a regular, normal person. And I was sweating so much talking to the recruiter. And then after you kind of make it past that first step, then I believe you get called in to meet with theoretically who you will assist. So I got to meet with VPs in development. And then after that interview, I also on the same day got to meet with two, I think they were like managers or coordinators at the time. So people I would work with very closely as well. I wasn't going to be their assistant, but we'd be on the same team. And so, we also kind of got to gauge one another. And then there was a coverage assignment. And this is when I was like, I'm definitely not getting the job. Because in my head, I'd heard from my friends who had worked at, like WME, CAA, and they're like, coverage is so intense and you have to do it right. And I'd never done it before. So I just like Googled how to do it. And I asked all my friends who had worked at agencies, and they gave me little tips. And then I sent that in, and thankfully it was good enough. And I believe that was basically the process.
For context, what is coverage?
That's a great question. Does anybody else want to jump in, or?
Sure. Coverage is basically a brief summary of the material. So whether it is a script or a pilot, or sometimes it's a book. And then the reader, the person that's giving coverage, will then give, along with the summary, their kind of brief thoughts about whether or not the executive who's reading the coverage should consider this person or project and pursue it even further, or if it's not worth their time to even read the material.
But yeah, how was the application process like, going back to what it was?
Oh, I forgot that was the question.
Me too.
For me, it was a little bit different. It ultimately came down to a connection I made through a mentorship component of an internship program that I was part of. And it was the Academy Gold program, which is a diversity inclusion program through the Academy of Motion Pictures. The people that do the Oscars, it was super fancy, and I was just like super like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm part of this. And I was doing it through school. So if anyone is interested, I always hands down will recommend that program to any student because it changed my life. But through that program, I met a mentor who was a producer, an animation producer, and I was very vocal about I want to work in animation. And so they paired me with that person, and they ended up being the producer for Lego Movie 2 and had that Warner Animation Group connection. And through my mentorship with her, she introduced me to a bunch of different people to just expand my network. And so I got really lucky with being assigned a mentor that actually really, really cared about my growth. And through there, I met my boss at Warner Brothers, who actually moved over to Netflix and is now my current boss. So, it's funny, but that's basically, there was sort of a formal application process where, I sent in a resume, a recruiter called me, and, went into interviews. But I think if it weren't for the kind of domino effect from all the other things, I definitely wouldn't be even here today. So very grateful for, just the people that are in the industry that are also very supportive and want to nurture and grow the next generation of filmmakers and, executives and, creative voices. So very lucky in that regard.
Yeah, there is a saying that once you get your first full-time paid job, you don't ever have to go back on job boards or LinkedIn stuff anymore, because the connections you make, if you're doing great at your current job, your current bosses or colleagues will, open doors up for you. And now I just feel like my encounter with Pearl was kind of haphazard because I did apply on LinkedIn and got the first interview and 4 other interviews after. So my entire, the process took 2 to 3 months actually before my starting date. But I felt necessary because, I interviewed with my direct boss and then the chief creative executive and the head of development and also the manager who's leading the Shanghai creative team. So it's all necessary if you can gel with each department or each facets of the creative team. And I just realized they probably liked my resume because I worked on bilingual productions before, which is something they're really looking for in a candidate. And, for those who are hunting jobs right now, I also feel like you will shine the brightest at a place where you belong. That's something I felt.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jumping off of that, when I was transitioning into my new job, I got to help kind of interview and look for some people to replace me. And it was in that experience, I got to see, successful interviews, successful resume, just kind of get to see their perspective and exactly what what you said. I think a big part of the interview, at the very least, is not only making sure that you're competent, smart, ambitious, you can get the job right. I would say maybe that's like 50% of it. Now it's maybe even 25%. Like the resume shows that you can do the job. On the resume, you really highlight your skills that directly relate to whatever job you're applying for. That's done. When they bring you in, they really want to see, like, what's your personality like? Are you someone that I am gonna, be comfortable with, happy with being in the office, talking to until 9 p.m. A big part of my job was, not only like the 9 to 5, but like you will work really long hours. They will ask for your input. You will get to know each other, I think, beyond just, boss assistant, because you're working together so closely. And so I would say in the interview, like you want to come across polished, like the best version of yourself, but also be real, be genuine, because exactly like Ray said, if it's the right fit, they'll feel it and you'll feel it. And it'll just be a wonderful, wonderful working relationship.
Speaking of good qualities in candidates, is there anything that you love to see from a development candidate?
I would say patience. Just measuring from my experience jumping back from production, one of the first things, my bosses asked me was, are you going to be okay working in a slow-paced environment? Not that slow, comparing to shooting TV on set, yes, but we have a lot heavy readings too, things like that. But they want to make sure I have the persistence and stamina to work months and months on a pitch, on an outline, and still be active, in my brain and actively contributing. And I realized the work we do in development is very seamless and gradual. You don't really see how many shots being crossed out or how many pages are covered in a day. But when you do get a project, on the slate and get a green lit, the amount of work and time you put in is really worth it, hindsight. So I would say patience. Yeah.
Do you feel like there are any good skills to have? Like, should they be speed readers, polyglots? Like, is there anything?
I believe being a good reader is essential for everybody in film business, no matter you're in development or any other departments, but I do want to say, if you have the ability to identify a writer's voice successfully, that will make you stand out as a reader among, other college students who just graduated, for sure.
And I think just basic like assistant, if we're talking just basic skills, organized, can, be okay with, being under pressure. I think because a lot of it can feel like a little bit overwhelming at times when there's a lot of asks coming in from the top. And so being able to keep a level head, I think, is important. Emotional maturity as well, I think, just as a professional in general, I think is a good quality to have. But in terms of just development specifically, I think having that passion for storytelling, and I know that's kind of a big thing, but, it's kind of like when you watch a movie and, all you want to do is just talk about it with somebody and you just want to like figure out like what went wrong or like what did go right. And, just the excitement about the storytelling, I think, will make a good, if as long as you have all the hard skills down, like that also has, I think, is a good candidate for development. Is how excited are you to learn, not just about, the day-to-day stuff, but also like really like engage with the creative material and challenge yourself. I think that's important. But yeah.
I would say, going back to something, Mira, you had mentioned earlier about like reading as much as you can, reading things that come across your desk. I think that's what maybe like the number one thing, aside from what I just said earlier, like being real, that could make you a really good candidate in development. Like you are CC'd on so many emails and your bosses, one of my bosses could be working on like 15 to 20 projects and the other boss working on just as many. So so many things are coming across your desk and it's really easy to be like, okay, does that email Ask me to do anything? No. Next. Do I need to do anything? Next. But I think what makes a really strong candidate, especially if this is something you want to do for the long term, read every email you can. You will gain so much information. I would often like go back through the thread if I'm like looped into an email and it's been going on for a long time. I'm like, ooh, what's happening here? Oh, you learn some interesting things. And then also like read all of the scripts that come across your desk or outlines, even if your boss isn't assigning them. Oftentimes you're not going to say, hey, can you read this? I want your thoughts. You read it, and then randomly one day they might say, oh gosh, I'm wondering like what to do about this, that, and the other. And if you just, give them your thought in the appropriate time and manner and show that like you're doing this just on your own, that will really, really impress them and really help you go far.
Yeah, definitely. It's the initiative, I think, is what makes you stand out in the long run.
That's a succinct way of just, yeah, that's the word.
Grace, do you have something?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe also want to add the ability to summarize and efficiently note take, which is different from dictation or jotting down every word people said. This is useful for any kind of creative assistant work, to be honest. If there are a room of writers or a room of producers, they all have their own feedbacks and ideas. Can you accurately put them on paper and summarize and distill them actively and present it to afterwards to your team to use it as an actual working document instead of just a transcript? That sort of skill will be very essential. Yeah.
So, is it important to develop your creative voice before going into a development role?
I think for me personally, I was attracted to the development role in order to develop my creative voice, right? To kind of be informed of like, I think cultivating my own taste, being exposed to what's out there, what makes something good versus bad in the lens of a business perspective, as well as a creative perspective, understanding all of the factors that go into making creative decisions, and how that will help me inform me in the future, if I decide to pursue a creative executive, role, or if I, put all my eggs in a basket and pursue writing, I think that's what attracted me to development.
Yeah, I do want to say there's a distinction between voice and taste. So as a reader, we're constantly evaluating other voices. If you're only looking at other people's work through your own voice, that might be hard to be objective when you're evaluating them. But at the same time, if you do have a mature creative voice, if your team is looking for original ideas internally, that's like the best time for you to shine. So I just feel like everyone should mentally know the difference between the two things. And your voice, does grow as you're working in development. I definitely remember I had no world building ability prior to working for animation. And now after seeing so many, projects with visually enriching imaginations, I can probably take on something more high concept in the future if I'm writing myself, things like that.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it can be hard if you haven't worked in the industry before to be like, what's my creative, vision or voice or taste? You already have one. You've probably been watching TV and movies and being aware of, pop culture ever since you were very little. And so just thinking to like, oh, I like that TV show. I like that movie. I didn't really like that. And then, just taking it a step further, that's all it is. It's just, why don't I like that? Why do I love everything that that producer does? And, bringing that to work too. And a lot of times in the interview, going back to that question, they will ask you like, what's your favorite animated series? And having those answers at the ready and also having the reasons to back it up is great. It doesn't matter if someone hates the show that you love. It's just showing that you can speak to something and analyze it in a way that, you can effectively communicate.
speaking of that, I vividly remember the head of development when he interviewed me. We bonded over Undone for 15 minutes over a half an hour call. So that's absolutely essential what Andi just said. Yeah, know what you love and back up your reasoning.
So for some people trying to prepare themselves to break in, how have you guys been flexing your development muscles outside of work? Mira, I think you're doing something this spring.
Yeah, so I'm part of a writers group just on a weekly basis, a very small one with kids that I went to film school with, just to kind of dive into that kind of creative mindset again. And I reached out, I think, because I was in that, like, I need to start writing again to know more about like writing in general. An old screenwriting professor, who does like private classes on the side. And yeah, I plan to take his class in the spring. So excited for that.
Yeah, very similarly, I started a small group over the pandemic too, online, with people across 5 different time zones, probably. Yeah, and it's been going strong. And definitely the way we learned how to give notes, give feedback in development really helped everybody in the group. And I felt more confident, in building larger narratives, say TV show, things like that, or high concept feature in the future from the things I learned at work.
Yeah. Are we all trying to be writers here? Is that what I'm getting at?
Perhaps.
Possibly.
That may be the case.
I love it. I flexed my creative muscle by also writing. Last year, I took a lot of writing classes and kind of in preparation, knowing that I wanted to hopefully transition to a script coordinator role. So I knew I had to get my samples ready. So yeah, writing. And I think also watching TV, like I said, it is part of the job. It's the industry that you work in. So, it's like, if you make shoes, you study shoes. If you make TV, you study TV. So there you go.
It's so fun. Like now we can just tell our parents, like, I'm doing homework. I'm watching a movie.
Yeah, just don't bother me. I'm doing research.
Sharing something.
Exactly.
So are you guys ready for some audience questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So first one is, what are your thoughts on working for an agency in order to work in development for animation? Is that truly the best way to break into animation?
I think, I don't know, does anyone here have agency experience?
I didn't.
I didn't either. But I mean, I know a lot of people with agency experience, and I think everyone who's worked at an agency can really vouch for their experience there being a really positive one and really prepared them to work in the industry, whether it is animation or not, just because of the sheer volume that you're exposed to on a day-to-day basis. So, I wouldn't scoff at the idea of working at an agency, even like the idea, like, a lot of people start off in the mailroom and kind of work from there onto a desk. And, that might sound like really, I don't know, it might not be what you want straight out of college. For example, you worked your butt off working, 4 years at school, and then you're in a mailroom. That might sound kind of, I don't know, like a bust to your ego, but I think there's so much value in that kind of environment. You're making a lot of connections. So many talented people start off in the agency. So, I think the structure of an agency, they hire within cohorts, if I'm not mistaken. And, you kind of, really just bond with the people that you work with, from my understanding. And it just seems like it really prepares you for the future. That being said, I never had to go through that experience, but I still feel like, my entry level position, supporting, basically being the PA for the executives at Warner Brothers, that was kind of my, 101, really just understanding, learning the etiquette, basic office etiquette, and how to communicate over email, and how, just dealing with office stuff, kind of learned a lot of that just, in that environment. So I wouldn't say it's necessary or required, but it definitely helps. And everyone has their own journey. And obviously, like, just between all of us, we all have such different experiences, and we're all kind of working in similar, areas. So, it's if anything, it's really fascinating to see how all the paths kind of go their own way.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Spot on. I think wherever, if you're getting your first job out of college, if you can get a job at an agency and it, pays you enough money and, it works for you, then go for it. But I think the biggest thing with looking for a job, you might not get that dream job right out of the gate. It might not be exactly in the department or at the company that you want, but if it's close, if it's in the industry, that's amazing. That's a huge step. Or even, if right now you can't get a job in the industry, like COVID's going on and you really want to work in live action, and, you get something that can help you develop the skills that will get you into the industry, then that's great. Like I said before, I was an assistant in development. I had been an assistant in other industries. So I could kind of say, well, I didn't work at an agency like maybe some of the other candidates you've talked to, but I promise you, I can handle the office, tasks, and I'm a fast learner because of X, Y, and Z. There are many ways to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, essentially you want to gain either skills or resource or both out of a job, especially your first job. That will basically set you up for what you're going for next. What I've learned from my friends who went for the agency route is you don't necessarily have to always shoot for the biggest companies out there. There are smaller and growing agencies who, definitely value newcomers and talents, as strongly as other bigger places. And chances you will build a tighter community out of that. And everybody I knew who worked in smaller agencies ended up going to a job they really love in production or development or writing afterwards. So there's the hope there.
You don't have to start in animation to work in animation. Just throwing that out there. But as we move on to the next question, are you guys staying okay with staying like 10 more minutes? Okay, cool. So next one is, would love to hear about the pitching and sale process. What kind of material is necessary to pitch? How do you like to put the project together, especially if it's an art or board-driven project versus a script-driven project that's brought to an animation house?
So on the feature side, pitches can be anything from, hey, an agent hitting up an executive and being like, hey, this writer has just a basic general log line and he just wants to like talk to the executive. And, it can be that kind of vague, all the way to literally having a completed script, like the entire deck, having artists attached, literally having most of the, talent attached, and sometimes especially on the next Netflix side, we can have a completed movie that will just land on our laps and decide whether or not we want to take that on, and so it really can just vary, but I think it really depends on the creative voices attached and how much they can vouch for that story and the characters and the thematic elements, and is it worth pursuing this idea, and I know that's kind of a vague answer, but that's kind of my experience work organizing and seeing all that material come in and being part of those conversations. Yeah.
Is this question about if you are trying to pitch something and have someone buy your project, or if like in development, like when we're getting something together to take out?
I think it's selling.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I would say, a lot of what we do is, you get a deck together and maybe you get some supplementary materials, but it really comes down to the idea. And I think, if it's a writer who came up with this idea, them demonstrating their passion for it, it may be, if it has like a personal connection to their life, that's always really impactful. And yeah, I think it's so much fun though to bring those different elements together and see kind of like a show start to take form. But then that being said, once it's sold, it could end up being completely different too. So it's like about being nimble and being open to kind of wherever the project goes.
Yeah, there's the process of once a pitch is ready, a project is ready to go out, we would look into what companies, taste and branding who might like our project, this current project, and get in touch with them and set up meetings. Sometimes, there's a general and then followed by the actual pitch session. And then, it's kind of like a process of elimination or like almost like interview and dating. Whoever end up loving the project the most will become our collaborator, and the sales will be complete. Or it became a partnership in co-producing, like Netflix have done with us before. Yeah.
I think if you're an artist or a writer trying to get that foot in the door, I think the biggest hurdle is getting representation if you want to pitch to a studio, production company, whatever it may be. It's that like most places won't take a pitch unless you are going through representation. So I think having different avenues, for example, if you're a writer applying for fellowships or programs, having a little bit of credibility. If you're an artist, if you're have an Instagram account. Like I have so many execs and there's so many spreadsheets of even just Instagram accounts of artists that maybe be unconventional too, but have a really interesting take and perspective. And so it's this industry is also ever changing too, so it's kind of exciting to be a part of that. But ultimately it's just a matter of throwing yourself out there and letting the world know, like, I want this opportunity, and give it to me.
And also put your contact information out there. Make sure people can actually reach you so they can get you to work for them. Okay, anyway, what kind of title should people look out for entry-level development positions?
Trainee positions. That was the position that I had like first going in. And of course, like internships always help too.
I mean, I would say sometimes you might get lucky with like a temp job, if you hit up some temp agencies. I know a lot of people and a few at DreamWorks too who got their foot in the door because, DreamWorks wasn't necessarily hiring a full-time employee, but you show up for a couple months, everyone loves you, they can't live without you. And, when something does open up that's full-time, you might get that. So I would say, just you don't need to solely rely on like, NBC Universal, like jobs or like the main job page for whatever company you want to work for. Like I got a previous assistant job through a temp agency. So just be open. That opportunity could come up anywhere.
Yeah, I've seen MFA or MBA candidates who are interning at places and end up becoming full-time employee after they graduated. So that might also be a fast track sometimes.
Very cool. So for our final question, do you think writing is more challenging than creative development?
I saw that in there. It was in reference to Mira's put your egg in one basket, right?
You read, okay. I'm not looking at the chat, so I have no idea where this is coming from. But I think development. So the question is development harder than? No, is writing harder than development? Is that? Yes. I think it's totally two different things, right? Like it's writing is difficult because you are like stuck in your head. You have to solve the problem that you created yourself when you're writing. Sorry. Sorry, I'm seeing the chat here. Do you think writing is more challenging than, say, creative development? I think it's different, right? Like I think they're totally different challenges because it's just completely different, like positions that you're in. I think being a writer is creatively challenging because you're like, you have to put your own voice and your own, you know, soul out there. And so you're in a far more vulnerable place, I think, as a writer, because you're also putting yourself in a place where you're literally saying, okay, critique me, literally tell me where I did everything wrong so then I can better myself, right? And better this product. Whereas in a creative development position, you're in a more strategic position of like, you know, it doesn't really matter like what your personal like or your opinions are, your personal voice per se, but it's relative to everything, the projects that you're managing, the creative, you know, you're serving as the creative support for the filmmakers and the producers and the, you know, the writers. And so it's two different things. And so I think for me, when I said that, it was because you know, I'm young, you know, and I'm still trying to figure out like what my life goals are, and I think that's totally fine. And you know, because I'm exposed to so many different aspects of this pipeline, I've become so much more interested in writing, even though I studied it in school. So, you know, just exploring different options and seeing like, if I were to put all my eggs in one basket, doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, one thing is harder than the other. It's just more so, you know, what do I want my lifestyle and my creative fulfillment to look like? So I don't know if I just started rambling there. I don't know if that answered anything.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to take it? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah, I just love what Mira said. I'm recalling something my writing professor used to say, like, to be a good writer, you have to be able to get really deep inside of yourself and be personal, but also willing to sit down and put in the work. So it sounds like a quite lonesome process compared to creative development, which is a teamwork. You're constantly bouncing ideas with people around you and shaping one project together. If anything, that sounds remotely difficult. I believe it's that difference. Can you stick through on one story you're trying to tell, versus, you have a team of people and friends around you to support you, uplift you through a project. That's the hard part for writing, I guess. And I do also know great executive, like creative executive, who can't write like a creative narrative thing, one pager, who just can't not do it. So I do believe they require different skill sets. In development, besides knowing story structure, things like those, you also need a sense of, the market and who are you serving? What's your target audience? Where are we potentially going out for this project? Those business instinct, requires time to build as well. So that's also challenging and fun for people who want to grow in development.
Andi, you got something?
All interesting points, definitely. I would just say, for me, when I was working in development, like I said, I was applying to those assistant jobs thinking like, I want to be a writer, I just want to get my foot in the door. And when I was in development, I thought, oh, do I want to work in development? And I was really, really excited by the idea. And it was really hard to kind of, figure out what I wanted to do, because development is so fun in so many different ways. And it is extremely, extremely creative. And it's interesting. I think a lot of folks that I know who are in development are also writers or were writers or are very good at writing. So I think, it's not necessarily like one's like creative, like pouring your heart out all the time, and one's like business robot, like no one here is saying that, but I'm just saying like, if you're worried that it's like kind of one or the other, it's not. It's just thinking about, like Grace said, how you want to be involved in a project. You want to be involved in, the pitching, the selling, the consumer products, making choices about like the music that's in the pitch deck. Like, do you want to be involved in that way? Or do you want to just be involved, exclusively on crafting the story and the narrative and getting notes from executives on that too? It's not just like you're in like a little castle writing and it's so glamorous. Like, you are definitely part of like a big machine and contributing your work to that as well.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're making amazing things that inspire kids to take on the world. So animation is a good place to be. But for our last question, is there anything you wish you told your little development self at the start? Like, what did they need to hear?
I think I would have told myself back on day one of the job, don't be so intimidated by the execs. I came in, again, my first industry job. I was so nervous. I was like trying to be like, oh, most perfect robot for everyone. Like, oh my gosh, VP, EVP, SVP, CCO, like the titles freaked me out. And then as I started working there and getting to know these people, I realized like, oh, like this is so stupid, but like, execs, they're just like us. Like, it's just like so silly, but like realizing that even though these people hold like very fancy, wonderful titles and do a lot of really cool work, they are approachable. You can ask them to a general, and in those generals, you can learn so much, not only about them and their path, but, kind of figuring out what you want to do just by hearing their experiences. And so I would say, don't let people with those really fancy titles intimidate you. I think if you're at the right place and surrounded by good people, they'll be more than happy to maybe be a mentor or guide you, or at least sit down over coffee and share, a bit about their career with you.
I think for me, it would be don't feel so pressured to know exactly what you want, because I still don't know what I want. And I think, when I started working, especially amidst the post-grad existential crisis, of like, who am I if I'm not a student, and does work define me? And, I'm getting coffee all the time. And is that who I am? And, just knowing that doesn't, your value is not tied to what you do on a day-to-day basis at work. It's, just understanding that and making sure that like, I'm always just learning, just make sure that you're learning. And if it means learning how to send an email, like that's still progress at the end of the day. So don't beat yourself up too hard, because I did a lot of just, crying just to myself of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I like, worthy of working in this industry? A lot of like imposter syndrome too, of like, I'm granted this opportunity and I don't know if I'm, doing the most that I can, and the pressure of just putting it on myself to just be kind,
Yeah, for me, maybe tell myself that, two words, big picture. So why I said that is, for one, when I first started to give notes to our reading material, it's hard to zoom out to evaluate the concept or the abstract things or the message of a story. Then, things I'm more familiar with, say structure, character, voice of, the writer, things like that. And that really took time for me to adapt how to give notes more overarchingly instead of being nitpicky, because you're not writing that script. You are shaping it, towards what the company's branding needs or what's currently better for the slate. You're not writing, you're not holding the pen. That's a big distinction between if you're, executing one thing versus creatively guiding something. And another layer of big picture is, like Mira said, sometimes you're bogged down by small tasks day to day. But then ultimately, if I think about why did I want to get into development, on my first day, I deeply knew what I wanted from this job. And I'm still here to gain those experience from here. So these small hurdles, maybe the coffee's coming in late, things like that, I can overcome them easily compared to the great things I'm learning from my bosses and colleagues every day. Yeah.
And everything will be okay. Monty, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so awesome. Thank you all so much for being here with us. And we actually had a couple people in the chat room say that they didn't intend on going into development, but now they're really intrigued and they really want to they want to explore that path. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming in and inspiring everybody. And thank you everyone for watching. And I'll be closing the Zoom, but I'll be closing the live stream. But again, thank you to our wonderful panelists for being here and for giving us a little extra chunk of your time. I know we went a little over. So yeah, I will end the live stream right now. But so yeah, thank you guys for watching.
Thank you for listening, everybody.
And thank you for organizing this. This was fun.
Yeah, this is really great.
Thank you. Okay, I am
Thank you,
trying to end it.